Ahoy hoy ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Canadian No Sides and another video on Hearts of Iron 4. Today I'm going to be looking at mechanical changes I'd like to see in the game to improve its playability over the long term. I have done a couple of other Hearts of Iron 4 videos if you want to check them out, but without further ado, let's get into it. And one of the first changes that I would like to see is the ability to upgrade your chiefs of staff, your chief of the army, your chief of the navy, and your chief of the air force. I think you should be able to upgrade these guys over time. So maybe you don't start out with 0.3 in army experience gain, maybe you start out with 0.1, and then over time you can upgrade them to 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. I also think you should be able to upgrade their specific abilities. So say you don't start out with out of supply penalties at -6, maybe you start out with out of supply penalties at -3%, and then you can upgrade it to -8 or -10. Depending on how much investment you want to make in that particular chief of staff. I would suggest using political points for this, but you can come up with a different point system that you want to use. I would also like to have a similar thing for the military high command. So being able to upgrade specific military high command members, maybe starting off with less of a benefit at the start and then improving it over time based on how much investment you want to make in each specific individual. I would also like to see the ability to maybe make your own military high commander or your own chief of staff. It would obviously cost more, but maybe they'd have specific benefits that would fit your playstyle better. So if one of these guys doesn't have the specific benefit that you're looking for, then you can make your own with your own specific benefit, and of course it should probably cost more because it's tailored to your style of gameplay, but it is an aspect of customization you can add to the game, and it would make every single run different and unique. What I would also like to see is the leader upgraded over time based on your style of play for that particular run. So if you, instead of getting specific instead of getting specific traits at the start, well, maybe you get specific traits at the start, but you only get a little bit, and over time, what you focus on tends to be what bonuses the leader gives your country, right? So if you focus more on industry, maybe he gets more industry bonuses because that's what your country's been focused on. Or if you've been focused more on military development or production capacity or research, then the leader, whatever leader you're using, gets more bonuses in that area. So it would reflect the leader of the country would reflect the style of gameplay that you're actually going for. Now, they're doing this a little bit in the new DLC from what I understand, but they're not doing it in this way. They're actually doing it with the leader telling you what goals they want to accomplish and then giving bonuses based on those goals. And I highly disagree with that because it limits playstyle. If you want to focus on your ground army and you're constantly having to make planes in order to satisfy the leader's goals, then you're constantly having to change your gameplay and playstyle to that particular leader that's in charge of your country, right? So I would think making it more reactive to your playstyle rather than telling the player how to play is more beneficial. Something else that they're sort of doing that I kind of agree with, but not really, is the ability to upgrade your industry. Now, they're doing it in a way where you can attach your industry to particular research and and particular production, but I'm not a huge fan of that. I would rather upgrade the facility itself rather than trying to tag specific items with a particular company. What I would have is maybe industry points that you can put towards a specific industry. Okay, so you'd have industry points that you could add to, say, any one of these industries. So you could focus maybe on industry, or you could focus on, material designers, or you could focus on the Air Force. But you wouldn't get enough points to stack everything, but you would get enough points to actually develop them over time. So instead of getting all these benefits at once, maybe you get only some of these benefits at the start, and then they improve over time. So maybe at the start you only get 5% agility and 5% max speed, and then the more points you put into it, the more agility and max speed that you get based on how much effort you want to put into each individual industry. I would also, something that is part of a theme that you're probably picking up on, is the ability to maybe make your own designer with your own specific benefits, and of course it'd be more expensive, so that you wouldn't be able to specifically get as high a benefit as the ones that are pre-made, but they would be towards things that you want to work towards in your specific playstyle. So maybe you want to focus 100% on research and not on any other specific benefit. So maybe you get up to, say, 20% air research speed, but it doesn't provide any other benefits. But if you, say, want specific aircraft to be able to perform better, then you'd be able to focus, say, more on fighters, or maybe you want to focus more on carrier fighters or something along those lines, where you could stagger the improvements you get based on where you want to put your research points. Anyway, those are just ideas and speculations on what I think would actually improve gameplay in this area. Oh, something I almost forgot is with a designer, say if you customize a designer, maybe instead of getting specific benefits to the type of equipment being produced, maybe you just get, an increase in production efficiency or the production efficiency cap, being able to focus more on getting your production up to speed rather than specializing how effective or efficient that particular weapon is. Stuff like that I think can add more dynamics to the game. The next mechanical change I would like to see is POWs. So if, say, you're a smaller nation and you get a bunch of your army encircled and you have no manpower left, I did touch on this in my other video when I was talking about the intelligence agencies, but I think that having POWs in the game would help with disaster saves and help specific runs. Even if someone screws up and gets their troops encircled, maybe you expend political power and can get some of that manpower back as part of trading POWs back and forth. And, maybe they gain an equivalent amount of manpower back and you gain an equivalent amount of manpower back, but it would help you more because, if you're a smaller nation, you need that manpower in order to fight on the front, right? And as I touched on in the intelligence agency, you might be able to free these POWs without having to expend political power. And, maybe you can do that during the war, or maybe you can only do that after the war. What do you think? I think you should be able to do it during and after, but I understand if people only want to do it, say, after the war, so that you can regain manpower and maybe lead to, improving your army faster. Something else I'd like to see is a change to an economy law. Now, these are fine, but I would like to change total mobilization and have it specifically tailored not to the country, but to the ideology you're going for in that specific country. And I'm fine with it being 80% war support, but I don't like the fact that the other country has to be so much more powerful in order for you to actually get to this stage. You should just need to be at war and have enough war support in order to get people mobilized to utilize the maximum amount of your economy. So what I was thinking is, if you're, say, communist, you call this a command economy, and you get 5% consumer goods, you get plus 20% output, but a minus 10% in reliability, a plus 10% to your construction speed across the board, and say plus 20% to specifically for military factory construction. Something along those lines. Now for fascist, you could call it a forced economy, where you could have 7% consumer goods plus 7% manpower, say minus 3% reliability or minus 5% reliability and minus 3% stability, but you get, say, plus 7 or plus 10% factory output and plus 10% dockyard output, as well as, say, plus 30% military factory construction speed, something around those. For democracy, you could call it a military industrial complex, and say you get plus 50% in terms of factory conversion speed, so plus 50% to convert from civilian factory to military factory or from military factory to civilian factory. I would think that'd be fair because it shows the flexibility of democratic nations. Though you'd still have 10% consumer goods, but you would also have plus 10% reliability and maybe a plus 5% to factory and dockyard output, plus 10% construction speed for military factories, something around those lines. I think that'd be relatively fair and give democratic nations a little bit of a boost, necessary boost. Now for non-aligned, say monarchies and such, I think the threshold should be lower, say around 60% war support, but they would get, fewer benefits, say 10% consumer goods factories and 5% or 10% factory and dockyard output, somewhere around there. You can call it a crown economy. For anarchy, you can call them, say, united unions, somewhere around there. You'd get 3% consumer goods, but minus 7% manpower and, say, plus 10% construction speed and, say, plus 15% factory and dockyard output, somewhere around there. I don't know. What do you think about those little changes? Put them in the comments below. Moving on. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is research slots. I don't think that countries should necessarily be locked in how many research slots they get. I think there should be a maximum, maybe 6. And I do think that smaller countries that have less ability to invest, getting 1 or 2 slots at the beginning is fine. I like that. But you should be able to expand how much effort you're putting into research over time. So I think that if you're able to use political power to purchase a research slot, you'd make it expensive, of course, say 250 or 500 political power in order to actually get a research slot. So that, maybe it slows down you getting advisors and your industry up. But if you want to focus more on getting as much tech up and going as possible, then the ability to purchase a research slot in order to focus more on research rather than having it locked behind focuses and the smallness of your nation. It would allow much more dynamic gameplay because it would be tailored to how you want to use that specific run. So if in one game you want to focus on doing a lot of research slots at the beginning and, rush a bunch of tech in order to get everything up to speed, or, maybe you want to leave research behind and focus more on filling out your officers and advisors with your political power, or focus on events and decisions in order to get the situation the way you want it. I think that I think that amount of customization would definitely allow for more dynamic gameplay. I also think you should be able to use political power to increase the focus on a specific research. So say you want to get light tanks, 1936 light tanks or 1941 light tanks out as fast as humanly possible. So you put your political power towards getting that tech researched as fast as humanly possible. Now, it might come at the expense of slowing down all your other research. Say, if you want to increase the research by 10%, maybe everything else slows down by 5%, so that everything else research is slower, but the tech that you really want to focus on, it researches faster. So I think adding that aspect to the gameplay is something that would be beneficial and create a lot of variability in what you want to focus on and what runs you want to do. Now, speaking of research, let's move on to something even more fun. Wonder weapons. These things that are impractical, but fun as hell to implement. Okay? So, and, you could make them a little more practical, but I do think that they should come at a high cost. So they should be late game tech, of course, but it should be something that, say, you could try and rush towards. Now, I do want them to be specific to an ideology. Well, most of them to be specific to an ideology. But there is one wonder weapon that I would like available to all ideologies, all countries playing the game. Because it is fun as hell. And it can be very practical. The ability to launch nukes with rockets. And I think that you should be able to, if you have rockets researched to the highest degree and nukes researched, you should be able to field a truck vehicle with special forces that would allow you to launch a nuke without air superiority. So you launch a nuke from your rocket truck. And of course, it would need to be in, say, a special forces unit, and you'd have a cap on them, but you could put them near your army or with your army and be able to launch nukes from that division. Now, of course, there'd be a risk to that because, say, if the division takes a certain amount of damage, then there's a percentage chance that the nuke goes off and, causes nuke-like effects in the general area. So I think that it would be a high-risk, high-reward style of gameplay that would allow for, say, breaking stalemates if the enemy has too many air forces and you can't, keep up production. So it could be something that you rush, or, it could be something that allows you more dynamic gameplay in terms of trying to break a stalemate at the end of the game, or something you just want to have fun with. Now, speaking of stuff you just want to have fun with, I think that there should be wonder weapons that are specific to other ideologies. So, fascist ideology should be able to maybe have a super bomber that could fly around the entire world and drop a nuke without air superiority. It'd require jet research, and it'd be a separate research slot off to the side, and it would be very expensive in terms of building, but it would be something that, say, allows you to also strat bomb, around the world, anywhere around the world. It would be a very interesting tech to have, for fascist regimes. Now, in terms of, sea power as a super weapon, maybe fascists get something like the Yamato. I think it was the largest battleship ever produced. Something huge. So, say if you were building it, then you'd have 2 slots up here to fill out in addition to the slots down here. So you could absolutely deck it out with whatever you wanted. That would be ridiculously expensive, but maybe you could have 10 slots or 15 slots. If they upgraded, say, 10 slots for, capital ship production, that would be beneficial. I'd like that. But for, say, the super weapon, you could have 15 slots to try and pump it out in time for it to actually make a difference. Now, in terms of the land army, you might have, say, a rat. You'd put it somewhere down here, and in terms of production, you'd have 2 slots up here and maybe some more slots down here, and have modules specifically tailored towards the massive land battleship. Okay? The super weapon that the Germans dreamed up, which was absolutely ridiculous and impractical, but it's something fun that you can add to the game, and if you have air superiority, maybe it actually functions. It would have reliability problems, of course, but if you have the production, then maybe, you can break lines with it. It would be something that, maybe you try and rush it in order to unexpectedly hit the battlefield. It would be a very interesting strategy. And of course, fun as hell. Now, for communist nations, maybe you could have the Iron Curtain tank. A tank with a ridiculous amount of hardness that, almost nothing can pierce it and doesn't get damaged by almost anything. It would be, again, it wouldn't be like a land battleship, so it wouldn't have the same amount of slots, but it would have maybe specific modules specifically tailored to that type of tank. And again, it fits with the Soviet or the communist theme, right? Now, let's say for communists, in terms of air power, maybe you have a carpet bomber. It doesn't have the same range as the super bomber that the fascist nations would have, but say it has, similar to the land ship, the same amount of slots, and you could have it destroy pretty much anything on the front line. It would have reliability problems, of course, and it would be very, very expensive. Even Strat bombers right now are very expensive, but it would be even more expensive. Okay? But it would be something that could clear a front line. It would be easy to intercept, and it would be very difficult to make practical, but it would be fun to use. It's a fun concept where you could basically, where the strat bombing ability of it, if you have air superiority, would be ridiculously powerful. And for communist nations, maybe you could have a super submarine. Something that is able to, say, launch rockets from. That would be a fun addition to, maybe if you've also researched nukes, then maybe you could launch nukes from the sub as well. Like, if you've researched rockets and nukes, maybe you could also, after you've researched the super sub, then you could, say, launch nukes from a naval vessel. Maybe that could be something that could be an achievement even. It would be fun to implement. I know. Now, for democracies, we'll say democracies and non-aligned can merge together because they don't really have super weapons. Necessarily, democracies aren't known for trying to build those wonder weapons. So for democracies, maybe you'd have a better version of a modern tank, something that's more cost efficient and more effective, so you can just pump hundreds of them out. They would have a ridiculous amount of production capacity. In terms of air power, maybe you have a more efficient small fighter. Something that has more agility and more speed than anything on the battlefield. So you could have small airframes that could easily get you air superiority very quickly. Maybe if you've researched rockets, you could have a super modern aircraft that could launch missiles, like air-to-air missiles. Something like that. I don't know. It's an interesting aspect to think about. Now let's look at Navy, because there is one aspect of democratic nations that I think you know where I'm going with this, that do have what you could consider a super weapon, and that is aircraft carriers. You could have a super carrier that had double or triple the capacity, and say that planes launched from it had an increased amount of range or something along those lines, or it had an increased amount of detection so that the planes being launched were much more efficient in terms of dogfights or naval bombing. Or maybe you could even have large airframes being able to be launched from it. Something that gives it an edge, a more dynamic ability. I think that would be very fun to play with. It might even be something that would turn more people to actually playing democracies. It'd be a lot of fun. Now, in terms of anarchy, I don't know. Anarchy is not known for wonder weapons, so maybe just give them, better guns, better artillery, better anti-air, and for Navy, maybe give them better cruisers and better destroyers. Something around those lines. Something to make it a little more dynamic, because they're not known for wonder weapons. I don't think anyone would buy an anarchy wonder weapon. But, maybe just increasing the lower end maybe just increasing their basic weapons and basic ships, maybe that would be enough. I don't know. What do you think? Anyway, I gotta go here. But if you have any comments about what I think the mechanical changes should be for Hearts of Iron 4, or if you have your own mechanical changes you'd like to see, put them in the comments below. If you like the video, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao.